Thanks for sending them.
Hi, Anthony.
Response I get all the time.
Hello, Anthony.
These guys.
Okay. You got a choice here or on the other?
We should have bet on that one. We should have won money on that.
Back it up.
I would have won money.
Thanks.
That's a-
That way.
Is that real?
This is-
Yeah.
It's from this.
Would be way up here. Yeah. Up there? Yeah.
Okay.
Responsible.
All right, we're all here. Anthony's on Zoom. Is anybody else virtual? Okay. Why don't we get going?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Packet of information for tonight. We'll just go from there. The housekeeping items, exits, both ends of the room, and again, the restrooms are behind you or to your left under that exit sign. We have committee members. Anthony is zooming in, and we have Mary with us again in the audience. Thank you. Is there anyone else virtually? Okay, will you let me know if somebody else can do? Very good. Okay. All right, so the first item beyond the agenda should be unapproved minutes from our last meeting, November 9th. Does anybody have any suggestions, corrections, additions? And the minutes will be accepted as submitted. Bonnie, if you know, make you change on the top. Okay, in terms of committee organization, everything you have in front of you tonight, with one exception, has been posted. And I say that because have given you an update of the department numbers, fire department numbers in Monroe County. And that's just like a worksheet for you. It has no bearing, for anybody. So as soon as we get landed with wherever that's going to be as a figure within a narrative, and you put a number with it, that will be posted. Notebooks, if anybody has any concerns about their notebook getting too heavy, let me know. Under communications, I did send out previously to the packet of information for tonight. This report is called the Consolidation of Fire Protection Services in New York State. It's up on the board there on the screen. It is a report that's been submitted through the Rockefeller Institute of Government, school within the SUNY system, done by Lisa Parshall. And I thought it was good information considering what we're doing here. So we're going to be referring to it. You'll see me refer to it from time to time, but that's there. You have it virtually or electronically now. You have it in print as well. Also wanted to let you know that on Wednesday, December 7th at 10 o'clock, fire department representatives from Huntington Falls and Mendon are going to meet with me to make sure that all of the figures that we're going to use inside the report are correctly identified and are correctly positioned within the narrative. So all of them right now, with just a few exceptions, you have seen. One of the things that will change is the data for 2022 that they have reported. Both departments have indicated they want to update that at the end of the year, this year, so that the figures representing 2022 are good for the whole calendar year, not just till, for example, June or August or September, whenever they made the report on 2022 data. So Steve Chitter will be there at that meeting. Corey, and Anthony.
I'm looking at that.
Okay, okay. So those three people are expected to be there, not meant to keep anybody out, just want to let you know what we're doing. And then once we have those figures fully confirmed, properly identified, they will be populated in the figure number in the narratives that are part of the report. At that time, it will become part of the report. And again, at the end of this calendar year, they will be populated for their correct information and given to you again in their final format. So in the meantime, you have the titles of these figures. You've seen them before. You should have them in your notebooks. They've been distributed in, printed format for you. So please refer to them as you would like. Okay, any other communication anybody has? All right, moving on then. Under item 7 on the agenda for the committee charge, on our task 1, chapter 2 is the format and the governance in the jurisdiction. We've gone through all that information before. I don't have the narrative ready for you to take a look at, and I want to focus tonight on chapter 3, which is the next piece that you have in your packet. When that's finished, we're going to go on to task 2, which is natural features, target features. And Anthony, through Honeoye Falls Fire Department, had populated those natural and target feature charts with the equipment numbers, the call types, and the staffing on each of those risks that we are subject to, either as a natural feature or a target feature. So we'll go over that. And then on task 3, there's just a 1-page right now, but it is a draft of what chapter 5 will look like. Beyond that, we're going to give you some information about moving forward into the modeling discussions. So that's the aim for the bulk of tonight. It's a little bit after 7, so we're going to spend most of our time on those focus areas. So let's take a look at chapter 3. If you look at the last page, you'll see that this was created on the 27th of the month. When I had it in print today, I took another look at it, did some edits, and actually filled in the piece. You look at your back page to start, it's page 12. And in red with asterisks, it says municipal and department assets. So they're really going into property ownership by the village, the district, and the fire department. So I created a narrative for that, and I built a table of data for it based on the assessor's reports for property ownership for those 3 entities. Within the town of Mendon, the village owns basically the firehouse property. The district owns the firehouse property and an adjacent piece. The fire department owns Carnival Ground area, Pond Road. So those are the pieces that you'll see in the chart. And basically what the narrative says is those 3 entities own real property, and the descriptions and the information on those properties are in the figure, whatever the number is going to be, outlined by the town assessor. So that piece is in there. All right, let's flip back to the first page. The operations section is divided into 3 pieces: staffing, equipment, and calls for service. So the first piece we've talked about, you've seen some of this before. We go through the tables that quantify the numbers of staff in both departments. Down toward the bottom of the page, you'll see some bullets. We're now talking about training and credentialing that goes with some of those firefighters. Then we go on into the red alert reporting system on the next page. It's used by both departments as a data entry platform, and most of the information that's been expressed by the departments comes from files and fields of information in this reporting. So we get information about staffing, we get information about equipment, we get information about call types. So there's graphics and tables, again, that talk about calls, staffing, and responsive equipment. One of the things I would point out to you here, right in the middle of the screen, the first area where it says figure and there's a blank. The departments agreed to take the 9 call types that are expressed in red alert and boil them down to generic call types that we think are affiliated with the fire service. So we're talking about structure fires, we're talking about rescues, we're talking about the other things you see here. EMS calls, MVAs, and alarms. So within that group, rescues come to play. The next paragraph down below, Mendon adds hazardous conditions. So they look at 5 call types, Honey Falls looks at 4. The information that's presented for both departments is in the same format. It uses the same graphics so that you can see them side by side if you want to do that. The next area that we're talking about under staffing, and we've talked a lot about this, is mutual aid and mutual assistance. So break down the definition of both. Talk about mutual aid in terms of its legal authority in New York State, how Monroe County uses it, that you have used it in your fire service response, and then mutual assistance. And I'm going to have you take a look at mutual assistance on the screen, please, Danny, if you would go down a little bit, right there. Mutual aid is case by case. I think we talked about that in that realm. Mutual assistance is not a temporary situation. It is planned. It is premeditated in that regard. It's used in critical incident planning, and it's part of what you look at in a department to get your appropriate staffing, to get your complement of equipment in response to the call types. I pointed out to you here in the sense that mutual assistance is something that you may want to consider. You may have to consider it by the counties that you work in, that it is a contractual relationship because it's not traditional case-by-case mutual aid. In the mutual offer, you look at the same things that you look at to gain in mutual aid. But because it is not temporary, it can be construed as a contractual arrangement, and you may need to further define it formally in writing. Ontario County is requiring that. You may not know that yet, but according to the fire coordinator, the emergency services director, it is something that needs to be formalized. Livingston County doesn't call it out in that regard. Monroe County does not, and I say yet, call it out that way, but may in the near future, and some changes to its mutual aid program. So I draw that to your attention because as we look at modeling and as we look at sustainable service and looking at different structures, that might be a consideration that your jurisdictional government structure may want you to do. Okay. Beyond mutual aid, at the end, that's at the end of the staffing section, we get to apparatus and equipment. Again, you have both departments have provided rosters of equipment. Honey Falls has done more of a descriptive piece attached to their outline of equipment availability. And Mendon has included the resale value of equipment when they go to replace them. In fact, the last time we were here, I think it was Steve Chitterer, and it's in the minutes, mentions that there's approximately a 38% investment return when a piece of equipment is put up for resale for replacement. One of the things that I wanted to point out to you here with apparatus and equipment is this worksheet that we talked about originally, or at the top of the meeting. This is the new sheet that gives the number of the department. So when we talked about this the last time, the sheet that you were given was not up to date for the changes in the structural arrangement of the fire service in Monroe County. So for example, in Battalion 1, we were talking about Ridge Culver and Laurelton, and they are now one department, and that is number 7, called Arundecoit. If you look down in the 4th Battalion, Scottsville is now the joint district, Scottsville Wheatland. So some of the numbers change. Hamlin, Morton, and Walker are now one department, number 4. Honeoye Falls is in Battalion 5 as Department 6. Mendon is in Battalion 3 as Department 6. So when you look at the equipment numbers of both departments, their department number is the same. The differentiation between the two is they start out number 3, the head for Mendon, and number 5 at the head for Honeoye Falls. The other side, the flip side, is still the apparatus numbering and the command personnel numbering. Okay, so this is not on the website. When we get a number to it, you get it into the narrative. We'll put a figure number on it, you get it on the website. Okay. If you look under calls for service, we have several pieces of information under calls for service. One of the things I did today was underline the various headliners underneath calls for service. So if you scroll down a little bit, Danny, you'll see call types. I underlined that. So we can pull it out quicker for the reader. That's something that's key to me as I'm reading something. I want to be able to kind of keep the organization together. So it helps me as a reader when things are segmented in a little bit greater fashion. You can find them easier. So call types, we have them. We talked about them already. There's 4 in Honeoye Falls. There's 5 in Mendon. Each department has looked at them as to the time of the calls, whether it's by month, by day of the week, or time of day. Right now, all that information is in one data set. So what we're going to do on December 7th is make sure that we break them out appropriately so we can give the month of the year, time of calls, one figure, the day of the week, a different one. So the reader doesn't have to be going back and forth and trying to find that inside another document. If you look at the box numbers, sometimes it's a box number is referred to as an emergency service zone. That might be a term that you're going to see on a more regular basis as opposed to a box number. So I put that in there. Again, box numbers, emergency service zones are used by both departments. We have both of their graphics. You've seen them, they'll be in there. The call locations, again, in different formats. So I want to make sure we break them out appropriately and correctly. And then here's what the red bullet at the bottom of call locations, called this out before. These figures that have dates on them and include data summaries for 2022, if they change, great. If they don't, the deadline in 2022 will be noted for you in the narrative or on the graphic. Okay, the next one is the response times. One of the things that I noted on the information provided by the departments, and they called it out when they first submitted the information, is response time is a subjective term. More definitively, it can be an en route time that the department calls back with the dispatcher. It can be an on-scene time if the apparatus driver calls in on arrival at a scene, or it can be the dispatch time. So we need to understand what the definitive definition is for response time when we're using it in a graphic. Okay, the second piece of this chapter, now that we've covered operations, is resources. You've seen some of this information before. Basically, fire protection comes in different ways. It's not only by a department, it can be done by the municipality. You know that because of building code, fire marshal, local laws, assessment. You know that different things have different faces under resources. So again, you come down to the fourth paragraph, you'll see special operations teams. I've underlined that because that's a segment under resources. But special operations teams come from county, they come from a region, they come from the state, they can come from the federal government, they can come from a consortium or some kind of a compact with multiple states. So depending on the need, depending on what's required of a call, you as a local department can get assistance for specialized call types, specific call types. You see some of the call types there that coincide back to a special team. Those are the bullets. One of the pieces that you've seen is water supply as a resource. So part of what you see here came in one piece with a description for the Monroe County Water Authority. If you see information or you notice information about the authority that's missing here, it will be in the chapter 2 expression of what an authority is. So they'll go hand in hand. Okay, if we go to the next page, you'll see that finances are a big piece of resources. We talked at length about the financial resources of the municipalities and of the district. And I've broken it down in here into the pieces that you're familiar with. The assessment piece, fire protection budgets, indebtedness, revenue, including grants, reserve funds and their purpose, contracts, how they're used for our purposes locally, property tax levy, and then real property ownership will be down the way here. It's now in red on here and for you. When you see tomorrow's email, you'll see how it appears in the narrative in the form that I put together. I think it should be on page 11, maybe. Right there, municipal and apartment assets. It's property on the real property piece. My updates today, when I looked at the print, you'll see tomorrow on your email. And when we get to the next meeting, that will be posted electronically for the website. Okay. Now, do you have any questions on the narrative? I know it's a lot to digest. hopefully it will get clearer. We'll continue on. The next piece in your packet is a red and blue graph. Mendon had given me some individual data sheets for the years that you see across the bottom and for 2000, 2005, 2010. They started by year when they got to 2015. Honeoye Falls has a similar graphic for 2015 to 2022. So I built this one from the information that Mendon supplied for the years 2015 to 2022. What you're looking at here is the same as Honeoye Falls. It's the aid given and the aid received. So it's mutual aid, both mutual assistance and mutual aid as they expressed it to me. That's one thing I want to verify with the departments at that meeting on December 7th. So you see the numbers represented in blue and red for those years. Okay. All right, so expect to see a new email for chapter 3. Again, few edits, piece on real property ownership by the department, Mendon Fire Department, Village of Honeoye Falls, and the Mendon Fire District. If we continue on with the agenda here, you should have in very tiny print, and I apologize for that, but we wanted to put it on one page. Okay, this is from Honeoye Falls. Anthony, thank you for building this. When we talked the last time about natural features and target features, one of the things we talked about was using your data about staffing and equipment and call types and overlaying it with the needs assessment for the town so that you could see, for example, if you look up here, is this what Anthony provided?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, it just looks so much better and bigger up there. I want to make sure we're looking at the same thing. So if you look at streams and tributaries, you'll see working this out. They get over the emergency response. This came from Honeoye Falls, and I had populated Mendon there for Arundequoit Creek. But as you go over, we talked about putting equipment on top of this. So Anthony has put swift water and ice water equipment. He's put staffing at 12 people. He's put mutual assistance on the Honeoye Falls calls from Rush. And then mutual aid, if needed, from Henrietta and the special ops team from the county. So as we take a look at the targets and build it out for appropriate response, these other things, the staffing, the equipment types, and the call type affiliated with it is going to come into play. So this is something else that we will do. Hopefully we'll have much more information for you on December 7th, and we can get it out for our next meeting, because this is a real important piece. The narrative that goes with this has some further information and definition on the features, both natural features and target features. So for example, under transportation on the target side, you'll see the state rights of way, you'll see the county rights of way, you'll see the town rights of way. So you know that the right of way ownership. Sometimes that's helpful to a fire department, especially when we get into different types of situations that involve the need for other resources on the particular owner of the road involved. So there's a lot of overlay here, trying to put it together in what is going to be an intelligent way for you for expressing it, for the public, for the town, and for your use. This isn't just a town report, it's hopefully for your use as well. So, note for the meeting on December 7th, to Anthony, to Steve, Corey, we're gonna want to take a look at this as well. Okay. One of the things that you'll see come out for our next meeting is a narrative affiliated with this, so that you can see the appropriate maps. We talked about maps before for bridges, for culverts, for dams, for all kinds of things associated here. So I'm going to work on that. Any questions for the natural and target features?
Anthony says the chief deserves the bulk of the credit to him.
Okay, thank you, Chief.
Good job. Yeah.
All right. All right, task 3, the third bullet under item 7 on the agenda. Current capacities and recommend sustainment model for the needs assessment. So if you take a look at the one pager here, titled Chapter 5 and resource consideration. When we look at staffing, we know from your tables, we know from your graphics that you need more people. That's why you're looking at mutual assistance. That's why the information you've given us is pretty significant on numbers for mutual assistance and mutual aid. It is the reason that both of the chiefs sitting here at the table went to the town supervisor and said, we're asking you for some assistance here. We want you to understand what's going on with our staffing ability on fire calls, not just structure fires, but other calls as well. So we're going to take the staffing that we have, and we're going to look at it in terms of how do we get more people? What are we doing? Is that sustainable? How far along is that going to get us, given what we have when we consider the numbers that we are putting together? So at one point we talked about NFPA and recommended staffing, and we talked about ISO and recommended staffing when ISO comes and grades a fire community. We're going to look at that and see where that comes into play with staffing. What are the recommendations? What are the benchmarks? Are we approaching them? Are we meeting them? If we're not, how far away are we? And what might we do to get there? And that what might we do should be something that you look at when you consider modeling how to get there. Is it modeling more people through a more widespread mutual assistance? Is it getting more people by looking at structural changes like Morton Walker Hamlin did, like Scottsville did, like Laurelton and Ridge Culver did? I don't know. I'm just saying to you, there are a number of ways to get more staffing on a reliable, consistent basis. Resource considerations will talk to you about the numbers that you want to achieve. Then the modeling will be your ideas about how do we get to what we want to achieve. If we look at equipment, you already know what equipment we have. You've seen the data, you've seen the graphics from both departments. You've seen how the equipment overlays the call types. So do we need other equipment? When we need more of it, are we getting it appropriately through the means that we're using now? Or do we need more of it on hand? Do we need more of it readily available on a daily basis? I don't know, but we're going to take a look at that. If we need more, where's it coming from and how can we get it? Again, the modeling piece. Finances. You know how you get money. You know what the revenue streams are. You know what the appropriations are to support your functions. Do you have enough money? And I say that on a very practical basis. Everybody says, well, we can always use more money. Well, yes, but given the bulk of the source of the money comes from the taxpayers, and your commitments through your elected officials and all of you as taxpayers, and there are 3 taxpayer representatives here, how much money is necessary to sustain the needs of fire protection in this community? Is it reliable? Is it consistent? Is it dependable? And as you look at the pieces under the finance section of the resources in chapter 3, is that going to meet all those needs and those instances of where you get money when you need it? If not, what are your suggestions? And I look to the taxpayers now, because you're the bulk of the money revenue for the departments. Where do you think taxpayers are willing to go with that? Is it equitable from the standpoint of meeting the needs of the community? Not equitable in terms of what the protection district pays, what the village pays, what the district pays. What they pay right now is what is agreed to be paid. We're talking about forecasting here. What is going to be practical to look at in a sustainable model for the financing needed based on the model that you think you want to look at, or models you want to look at. The community input here under finances is a very big piece. Again, the taxpayers are really footing the bill. The grants help, but they're kind of negligible. The reserve funds are committed to specific uses. The most flexibility a jurisdiction has is with the tax levy and its use and discretion. So please keep that in mind. When we look at resource communications or resource considerations under community expectations, this is where that chart of plans and studies and consultants and committee work comes into play. And if you have had a chance to look at any of those, or you're familiar with any of those, you know that, for example, in a master plan for a community, there's a public safety section, and the community has put down their expectations for public safety. Basically, you know, what I'm seeing is everybody does a great job. Well, yes, you do with what you have. Now let's look at what your realistic needs are from looking at all the information you put on the table. What are the community expectations? Not just for today, not just for next year's budget, but when you look at 5 years out, 10 years out, what are you looking at? We already know that one of the concerns 10 years out is training, because the training requirements are so great. I think it was Anthony, maybe it was Corey, somebody here last time made the comment, you know, who's going to be qualified to be fire chief in the next 10 years? What's going to happen? So when you look at the community expectations, we're going to look at some of the resources that have come into play when there have been some specific concerns expressed by the community about fire protection, and how they have been addressed or how they have not been addressed and still continue to be a concern expressed by this group at this time, not just for now, but in the future as they were expressed back when that report or that consultant would visit. So we'll talk about some of that. And there may be other things under resources. I don't pretend to have them all captured. I don't know that you have them all captured. So that still is a work in progress. So please think about considerations that you still need information before we can look at some kind of intelligent and thoughtful models to sustain fire protection for the community. Okay, any questions on this resource piece? All right, let's go on here then into other. First I want to ask a question of David. I could see you and you had mentioned that you thought we needed a whiteboard here.
Do think we do.
Okay, what are you looking
I
at?
think that I mean, it's good, all this information. I think that what we need to do is maybe individually a little bit, kind of brainstorm some stuff a little more organically, a little more fluidly, if you will. And I think some of that, if you're like me, if I don't quick write it down, it's out of my head. And the older I get, it was yesterday, it was out of my head. So I
Last
think
hour.
if we don't, not that, I just think that maybe John might have something, throw him under the bus. And by being able to express it a little bit and say, here's what I think, here's what this looks like, or equals, and then there can be a little more of a discussion about it. I think that's important to get us, you talk about modeling, and I see that, but then I'm like, I have 1,000 things in my head. I'm like, are we modeling for one model might be good for 5 years, another might 10, the next one 20 years out. And you look at that and go, well, then do you even worry about the 5 and 10? Do you go to the 20? You know, I think that needs a little more
Yeah, general discussion.
general discussion.
May I offer this? In doing this kind of thing before here in this place with a group of people, sometimes larger, sometimes smaller than this, we've used individual easels with large paper because we don't have whiteboard. What
Whiteboard,
I thought was a whiteboard is chalkboard on the other side of that rolling
right.
thing.
So
So
I whiteboard, I would have said blackboard, but I
Yeah,
know
you
it's,
wanna-
you know,
write something down.
write it down,
Those
flip
easels
the page,
with
go
the big
back to
pages
it.
work pretty good. Okay, so one of the thoughts, based on what you said,
Mhm,
would be, we have taxpayers here,
mhm.
we have fire departments here, we have government jurisdictions. Basically, we've got 3 entities represented at the table. John, Karen, Jerry are representing the municipal side.
Mhm.
Ryan represents the district commission, that's the government side. You and Steve and Robin are representing the taxpayers. And Chief Kester and Chief Truer and Anthony and Mike are representing fire departments. So if we took initially 3 easels and we said, what are your ideas about modeling from the representation that you have at the table? Come tell us what your involvement with your entity has concerns about for sustaining fire protection. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, and we take a look at that. And then we take the full group looking at that and say, geez, here's the commonalities. So we further work it together to see where we might go, and then use more easels, to more fully describe those models that you land on.
Mhm.
So one of the things that we need to take a look at is in this, let's just look at this report. Let's look at Lisa Harshell's report here.
Muffy, if I could interrupt, just,
Yes.
as far as securing the hardware for some of that type of activity, we'll take care of that.
I know you have it because we've used it here before.
Right.
All right, and I don't want to put you on the spot, and I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but if any of you have looked at this, I think your reaction is, wow, this has a lot of information in it, and it has a lot of thought-provoking information in it that we can use and may indeed help us as we look at what we're going to consider If you haven't had a chance to look at it, now that it's in print, I'm really hopeful that you will take a look at it. This has information in it that is more up to date than what you would have seen in the State Association of Fire Districts, for example, as they describe the government jurisdictions that work on fire protection. It has more up-to-date information in it with the number of fire districts, the number of municipal fire service, the number of not-for-profit corporation fire service. So Lisa, in putting this together, has garnered more up-to-date information on a real timetable that is going to have prime data for us. In the title, a primer, is put together so that you can take a look at this for various segments, and where you wonder, where did this come from? There are pages at the end with endnotes. So it more fully defines what she looked at and where she obtained her information, so that it is source specific and it lends credence and credentials what she's talking about here. And that is important because when the town board goes to look at this, anything that you say to them, that you give to them, has to be sourced so they can go look at it. You know, we're not here in a subjective way, we're here in an objective way. We're here to give the information and put it in a storyline to thread it together, but thread it together in a way that makes sense for your initial call to the supervisor. We don't have enough people. So everything we are doing comes back to what we need based on the needs assessment in the community, what we have, where we fall short, and how we're going to get back where we need to be most effective and efficient in reducing the probability of loss of life and property here in the community. In addition to this report up here, looking at modeling and sustainment, I'm going to put some information together for you in the next couple of days and get it out so that you can take a look at the kinds of information that will appear in the chapters about trends and projections and modeling for sustainable fire protection. You're going to see some of the highlights of community expectations so that you know where the community thinks we ought to be. I'll give you specific references for where that came from. So if you want to go back and look in one of those studies, you can. Some of them are online. Some of them are available in the town office, the village office. Trends and projections. This is perfect. Okay. In addition to that, the Genesee County report is out now, and at the Fire Advisory Board on the 14th of November, Tim Yeager, Emergency Services Director from Genesee County, came and did a presentation on that report. And I'll give you my notes from that meeting. And you will see that when you talk about, and that word consolidation is used, it gives the idea of putting together in what you might think of as a legal fashion, like taking the structure of two districts, making them one district, taking a village in a fire protection district like Scottsville and Wheatland did, and putting it in a joint district. Those are what I think people generally think of as consolidation. The Genesee County report uses the word regionalization, and the consultant defines that as regionalizing versus consolidating Regionalize, meaning putting together what you want, gathering it around you to further the local ability to apply the service. Kind of what you do in mutual assistance. You take what's around you, you put it together to better serve locally, whether you're bringing people in or you're going somewhere else in mutual assistance. So your idea of mutual assistance is a hand in glove fit to the concept of regionalization. Not meaning that districts can't consolidate or we can't do joint districts. I don't mean that, but it's a clear idea of what you're doing now, and it further defines it, and it offers more perspective on how to do that. And I will end that piece by saying to you that Tim had the opportunity to meet individually with, and I apologize, I don't know her name, I don't know her. She's now the head of the New York State Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Services, which is called DISHES by an acronym. And she talked with him about the Genesee County report of regionalization and said, you know what? I think you should try it. I think you should put something together as a plan of regionalization that will meet the needs that you talked about for Genesee County, and let's see how it goes. So maybe there's more in that regard of putting things together, what we now call mutual assistance, than what you've already done. He also talks about the ability of a timeline county where they're looking to do things in the report on 1 year, 2 to 3 years, within 5 years, within 10 years. So I'll give that all to you, hopefully after the weekend. Ontario County's report, I don't know where that is. I've got to get back to Jeff Harloff to see exactly. That got put on the back burner for a while. Do you know if it's done? It's not done, or
I don't.
no? Okay. I'll check with him. Okay, we know changes in Monroe County, the Scottsville-Wheatland Joint Fire District, the Ridge Culver Laurelton, now Arundecoit Fire, Hamlin, Morton, Walker. There are other things in discussion. There have been other things more, back farther in time. So there's a lot of things in terms of trends and projections that are out there for you to take a look at. The Fire Association of the State of New York, FASNY, the Fire District Association of the State of New York, they all have websites. If you want to go looking for some things in this regard, go ahead. I'll give you what we have. Okay, then when we look at modeling, we're looking at gaining some immediate relief for staff. We know that. Maybe what you're doing right now is enough for a projected time frame that you're looking at. I don't know. You're going to have to tell us that. We're going to identify the greatest needs, and we're going to do that, just like David said. We're going to look at the greatest needs from the taxpayer perspective, fire department, governance jurisdiction. What are your greatest needs? Or what is your greatest need if it's just, basically one thing in your area? Then we have to look at how do we remedy that? Is that an immediate need? Is it a projected need? If it is, what's the time frame for it? And how do you three groups, how do you look at remedying that need? So let's say we're looking at staffing, equipment as basic needs. If you identify them in all three, you're going to have ideas of how to get them from your perspective. And then we can brainstorm, what we need to do collectively to get the report to the town board. So if we need to recommend a change in structure, maybe a piece of structure. Maybe there's some changes that need to be done in local legislation. Maybe there's something that you're going to say as a government entity or a jurisdictional entity that you think is needed out there, but you can't provide it in the district, but you know that it can be done by local law by the town or village. Okay, let's bring it on the table. Let's put it out there. There might be something that you find as a department that doesn't happen as quickly as you want it to have with one of the municipal entities in terms of codes or inspections or something like that. Let's get that out there. Or public works response. Because the resources of the municipalities are in your toolbox all the time. There might be something that you're looking at as an association professionally affiliated with fire departments, fire districts, conference of mayors, state association of towns or counties that you think is important for legislation through FASME on their legislative agenda, or the fire district's legislative agenda, or conference of mayors agenda for public safety, or the association of towns, or the county association. I don't know, but let's get these things out there. And if there's a need for some legislation, identify what it is and where it needs to go to be advocated to a professional organization, to a particular legislator, to a particular body. So if we're going to make a suggested change in government structure, or we're going to make a suggested change in some other area, is it sustainable? In other words, how long is that going to be good for? Just based on your ideas. Then we'll look at outside influencers that are going to have an impact on it. You want to make sure if you make a recommendation to the town board, it is something that can evolve the next time an outside influence comes to bear. The next time New York State makes a change in the way that fire protection can be delivered. Are we on the cutting edge? Do we just need a resolution from our town board or village board to make that, make us part of that equation because of the way that you've looked at putting this together? Maybe. I think Monroe County's been on the cutting edge of public safety across all the disciplines for years. We're all intelligent enough here to look at all the pieces and put it together. But we need to be smart about any changes that we suggest to the town, because it has to be able for the town to evolve to the next best thing going in the village to go to the next best thing. We don't want to short circuit something now. We want to look to now and the future. So trends and projections are very important. What's happening around us is important, not just in Monroe County, in Livingston and Ontario, because we're adjacent to those counties. We're in fire service in both counties. Okay, so take a look at any information that you can get your hands on, that you already have, that you want to go out and look at. Watch your email. Try to be more diligent in getting things to you now that they've done. All right, where are we? Good. All right, where are we in terms of what your thoughts are here about what we discussed tonight? Anybody? Don't tell me you're overwhelmed.
So this conversation is fantastic. And what a time. So I'm excited to, it was a little, I don't have it. To be able to highlight and put in questions. And it'll be an interesting conversation. Sometimes I know too much, I'm good. And so I have more questions as to how can this look? And I do wonder more and more about the regional idea, since Lima is so close.
and Friends of Ontario. It will be interesting to see how that process goes.
This is a lot of information. I know we said we were gonna give a report to the town board by February 1st. And I don't know right now how realistic that is, because to do what we've talked about here, to get to a model, we may need another meeting. We only have one meeting in December because of the holidays. So when we get together the next time, if you feel that you need another meeting to take all that we put together next time and really consider it, to make a suggestion or suggestions for modeling, we'll ask the town board to give us to the middle of February if you think you need another meeting. I know it takes time to digest information. It certainly takes time to define it in a report. And I want to make sure that you all get time to take a look at this. It's not a document I'm preparing on my own to just, get to the town board. I want you to see it. I want you to be able to read it and understand what it is, and that it's the best that you feel you want. Go out there. So I say that earnestly. I don't burden you down with more time and meetings, but we're at a point where we've collected a lot of information. Do the best I can to spit it back to you in a narrative format and with all your data. But please understand that that's the working part that's going to take the next step for you into the model. And so think about that. When we come together December 14th, I want to know from you if you think we need another meeting.
I think we only have 3 scheduled.
Yeah, 1 in December, 2 in January, and really keep in mind that last meeting needs to be a sit down with the report to do any final edits and anything you want, because from that meeting, I'm gonna go back, do those edits. Report done, it gets emailed to you, and it gets pushed out to the town board. So basically, that's 2 working meetings, which I don't know if that's enough. We'll see when we get to the next meeting. I do want to ask you one question before we go, and I'm going to ask the supervisor, but this is also, if you have thoughts on this, weigh in. All of these figures, all of these data sets, charts, graphics, tables that are identified as a figure inside the narrative, I tend to put them at the back side of the chapter. So behind the narrative, like chapter 3, would be the figures. Figure chapter 3A, chapter 3B, in the order that they're in, like that. That way, in a 3-ring binder, town board's reading the report, public's looking at it, they print it. Okay? You can take out the figure, set it side by side with the narrative, and see where it came from and that it's crossed correctly. These tables are too big to try to fit into the typing, but they could be behind the page. But to me, that gets a little more cumbersome. So if supervisor says put them at the end of each chapter, I would do that in the formatting. Okay, and then as we get past the meeting on December 7th with the fire departments, and I have the order correctly, and I can number these figures, you will see coming to you electronically and in print will be this with all the numbers that correspond back to the narrative. So in the beginning pages of the report, there will be this list of figures. Each one will be identified by its name, 2A, whatever it is, and then figure 2A, where it is, will be behind the chapter narrative. There will also be a list of appendices. So some of the raw data that you presented to us in its entirety will be in an appendix. Again, here's the source of it. If you have any questions, there it is. It was summarized in a table in the figure. Does that make sense to you? All right. Well, Any other questions?
Just that there was a lot of nodding of heads. Look at an additional date. Because this is a lot of information, and in order to do it well, I think we're gonna need more time to sketch that.
Then I'll ask you, John, if you would please take a look at the calendar for community center.
Sure.
I think to be fair to everybody, it shouldn't be in December. Holiday, it's gonna be tough for me to do any writing. I think it would probably be whatever you find is the first date in February. It
Right,
would
would
be
be-
kind of keeping in our schedule.
Right,
Maybe the
keeping
first-
with our schedule, February 8th, February 22nd would be the second and fourth Wednesday of the month.
February what? 8th?
8th and 22nd.
All right, I think if you would just tentatively put them there,
Sure,
and if we need just one meeting, then we'll submit the report to you by the 1st of March instead of the 1st of February. If you find that you want a meeting on the 22nd to look at the report in writing, then we'll use it. I know you have to publish a legal notice for the committee meeting, so on the 14th of December, we'll see where we are before we leave the room and try to figure this out, but temporarily.
the thing that I would suggest is if we think we're gonna need at least one, then maybe go to two. It'd be a lot easier to cancel a second one than add a second one, I guess I would say.
And the 22nd is during the school break,
It is.
so there might be people not around.
Oh, but the other people may not too. I don't know.
Well, let's see when we get to January, if anybody has plans for not being here that week, we'll see if that doesn't work, then we'll go to the next week. If we need it. Okay, Anthony, do you have any questions or comments for us? Anything more from the committee? Anything from the public? Okay, well, thank you all. Appreciate you being here. Been here consistently. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. See you on the 7th for those who joined that meeting.